everyone, it's Reagan and welcome back to another video. Today I am doing an interesting type of recommendations video where I'm going to be chatting through 10 books you probably have never heard of. That's to say, I'm guessing you've probably never heard of them. I have used two forms of identification to try to cull down a lot of the books I've read to books that perhaps aren't either getting a lot of love on BookTube at large, just books I feel like I haven't really seen a lot of people talk about. I possibly have talked about them a lot because I love them. And two, I also used Goodreads as a way to filter down to the books with a low number of reviews, only a couple hundred to a couple thousand. There are actually quite a few books that I'm surprised have so little reviews on Goodreads. But yeah, so I've basically created a list of 10 books that I personally really enjoy, and honestly I feel like generally are not super talked about. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right in, and hopefully you find a new book to check out. Or who knows, maybe you guys have heard of all of these. Who can say? I tried my best. All right, so the first two books I'm gonna chat about to me are like quintessential novels that I love so much and I really would like other people to read, and I also think are perfect like readathon reads because they're both really short. They're both by the same author. The first one is Midwinter Blood by Marcus Sedgwick, which I feel like is his most well-known novel, but there's also another one called The Foreshadowing by him, which I've read and really liked as well. Marcus Sedgwick writes really short and creepy, but very atmospheric, enthralling novels. They usually have a very interesting like narrative choice. So Midwinter Blood is focused on a bunch of different perspectives through thousands of years of time, but everything is happening in the same place. And essentially throughout the novel, you're trying to uncover the mystery and the significance of this one location and why it exists through time, through all these different POVs. It's really dark, really intriguing, and again, a super fast read. And I always love multi-perspective stories, especially ones that kind of are beyond the characters themselves and are more about a thought or a theme that's kind of put through the eyes of all these different people. This one is really interesting for that reason. The Foreshadowing is set during World War I, and it basically follows two main characters, and they're both involved in the war in different ways. The sister particularly wants to help out by being a nurse, but unfortunately she quickly discovers that she can see when someone is going to die. She can kind of see the end of their death, almost like death itself, and it basically is used kind of as a metaphor and also a way to explore devastation of World War I and also kind of travel across all of the battlefield. Not only can she see when people are going to die, she also has a premonition which makes her believe her brother is going to die. She travels to the front lines and hopes to find him to basically prevent his death from happening. This is a book that has a lot of urgency to it as well. There's sort of this feeling of a ticking clock of following these two siblings and hoping that they're able to kind of avoid the inevitability of death. It's a really interesting book. Again, really, really short, very dark, but I feel like Marcus Sedgwick just has a way that always really captures my attention, and I think about them for many years to come. I read both of these books, I want to say like 4 or 5 years ago, and I still think about them often. Next book I want to talk about is The Unseen World by Liz Moore. This is a book that I read a few years ago and really loved, and I feel like Liz Moore is actually a pretty well-known author now. She recently released a book, Long Bright River. I feel like it's getting a lot of buzz. It came out earlier this year. It sounds really good. It's more of a thriller. This is more of a literary fiction novel, and it was her debut, and I read it and absolutely loved it. This is a story that follows a girl who's basically trying to uncover her father's secret hidden past. So therefore this book is both set in her childhood and present day as she's like reflecting back on her childhood. Our main character is a very gifted woman. She's very smart, and she was very smart both as a child and currently as an adult, and she deals with alternate reality and like programming and things. This is just a book in my opinion that is so riveting. I love the 1980s kind of suburban setting, but also combining elements of virtual reality and coding I thought was really seamless and really fascinating. It has an urgency to it of a mystery, but it also is a family drama. It has a lot of emotion. You're really rooting for Ada as you're following her from a child to an adult. You're rooting for her to kind of like grow up and also hoping that she finds the answer she's looking for. It's very captivating, beautifully written. I loved it a lot. And I definitely want to pick up Liz Moore's other novel that I feel like a lot of people are reading right now, but I'm imploring you to check out her debut because it's super good. Next book I'm going to bring up is Things in Jars by Jess Kidd. This was another recent read for me that I read earlier this year. This is also a more recent release, but generally speaking, I feel like I haven't heard a lot of buzz about it or a lot of reviews online. And this is a novel I personally really enjoyed and I feel like a lot of people would like. This is a Victorian era murder mystery novel where we're following our main character, who is a female detective during this time, which is obviously very rare, as she's trying to uncover and solve the case of a missing young girl. This deals a lot with the darker side of Victorian England, in that our main character, in trying to solve this case, also has to kind of confront her own murky past. This deals with supernatural elements, specifically mermaids, and also kind of the curiosity cabinet naturalist craze that was happening during this time, when people were basically collecting, or in some cases hoarding, unusual things uncovered in nature, and the more devious side of this, which could also include human beings. This is a really interesting dark tale. I really love the POV of our main character. I love the shifting forward and back in time, as we do uncover a lot about our main character's childhood. It's just a really interesting dark book. I was kind of expecting this to feel like a mystery of the week kind of novel. Really feel like it delivered a lot more weight, and it had a really significant like character growth journey arc that I just wasn't expecting and I really liked. So I thought this was a really strong murder mystery novel that was dark, creepy, eerie, kept me guessing. It was so entertaining. Next book I'm going to talk about is Fireborn, which is the first book to a new YA series, which again, I'm just surprised how little ratings this book has on Goodreads. This is a novel I read right when it came out back in October. Really liked. I thought it was a super strong debut. I thought it was a really interesting world, great characters, great angst, everything you want in a YA fantasy. I feel like this book delivered. Specifically, this is a novel inspired by Plato's Republic. It's set in a fantasy world that has dragons, but it's also a society that has recently overcome a societal overthrow. Essentially, it was once ruled by a very oppressive, aristocratic, very segmented regime, and this was overthrown by the working class. And now society is very organized by skill and talent, meaning people from anywhere can now aspire to be head of government, things like that. Alongside this, there are individuals called the Fireborn, or dragon riders, and previous only certain members from certain families could be a part of this, but now it's open to the general public and anyone can apply. Here we follow our two main characters, and this is a dual POV story, and they are both very close. They met in an orphanage, but they have very different backgrounds. Annie, the female main character's family, was all murdered by the previous regime and dragon riders, versus Lee was actually a part of a once super powerful family who was all murdered before his eyes on the night when basically the government overthrow happened. He should not really be alive either. He kind of escaped his demise, and now these two people, coming from extremely different backgrounds, met as young children, grew up together in an orphanage, and are best friends, and are both fighting for a place in the Fireborn ranks and claiming a dragon for themselves. So this has elements of like training and friendship and kind of that dragon military focus, but it has a super fascinating and really well constructed fantastical world as well. And basically throughout the book, the main plot driver is that some individuals from the past are trying to kind of overthrow the new structure. But overall, I felt like this book had great stakes, great emotion, really realistic and believable relationships. I was hooked from page one, well-paced, seriously, just like a really strong debut, and I really liked it a lot. So I would implore you to check it out. Next book I'm going to talk about is The City of Dreaming Books. This is a super popular book in Germany, so I'm not trying to imply that this isn't really popular, but for me, I had never heard of this book growing up and read it recently, and this is a book that came out in America, translated almost 20 years ago. This is a really quirky fantasy novel that I loved. It's full of illustrations, and it was just like such a fun ride. It basically follows our main character, who is a dinosaur, and he basically dreams of being a writer, and on his godfather, who's been kind of training him to be a writer, is on his deathbed. He basically provides our main character a piece of writing, which is the best writing he's ever encountered, and our main character agrees. And after his godfather's passing, he decides to go on a journey to try to find this writer at the City of Dreaming Books, which is a place that is like a book lover's dream. It's basically where book lovers, writers, and everyone lives. The entire economy is based around words and novels, and it also has an above and a below ground kind of world. Above ground there's shops, tourism, and all of that. Below ground there's these caverns where a bunch of rare books are hiding, and people called book hunters are searching for really expensive novels to sell above ground. Our main character kind of travels there, and he finds himself in the middle of a very devious plot. It's so clever and unique and charming. I loved it so much, kept me so entertained, and the book element of it, like if you like books, you're gonna like this because it just will put a smile on your face. It's such a clever book-centered world. Loved it. Next book I'm going to chat about is the Stolen Songbird. This is the first book to a YA fantasy trilogy, and just one again I haven't seen much about online, but I feel like this is a really strong first book in a series and a great trilogy to check out. One, I need to reread and actually finish the trilogy. I'm blaming myself a little bit. I need to keep reading this, but this is a really interesting book, and I think it's not so popular because it's about trolls, which I know can be like ugly and scary, but the trolls in this are kind of cute. So just like know that going in. But this is basically following our main character who is kidnapped by the troll society at the beginning of this book. Essentially, trolls have been cursed for 5 centuries by a witch in this world where they basically cannot leave anywhere. Our main character quickly realizes the reason why she was kidnapped and brought down to the troll city below ground is to help them break the curse. And she also begins to uncover more about the troll society and realize that there's a lot of misinformation going around. It's really, again, a great YA fantasy novel, really interesting world. I feel like there's not a lot of troll fantasy out there, again, because I think trolls are like not as sparkly and cute as like a vampire. But I feel like well-constructed, really interesting characters, great writing, great pacing, super entertaining. I need to reread it myself, so we can all read it or reread it together, but would highly recommend this one. Next book I'm going to chat about is the Queen Poisoner series by Jeff Wheeler. This is the first book to the King Fountain series, which is a high fantasy series that I really enjoy and have been liking a lot. Particularly, this is a story where we're following our main character Owen. In the first novel, he's a young child, and throughout the series, we're watching him grow up, and we're also following a variety of different characters. But specifically, in this first one, we follow Owen, who is a 8 or 9-year-old boy, and he's essentially taken as a political hostage and sent to the king's castle in this kingdom because his father committed treason, and he's basically being used as a pawn to prevent his father from doing anything else, otherwise Owen will die. In this fantasy world, the magic is essentially following this idea of being fountain blessed, which essentially allows one individual to be really good at something, and you basically discover what you're fountain blessed in almost by accident, and then you kind of have to hone that. And this skill can really range from being an excellent fighter in battle, to being able to compel people to your wishes, to being awesome at baking at bread. It can really range. In this story, we follow Owen as he becomes acclimated with the castle itself and also kind of begin to navigate the political structure of this world. He makes friends, he makes enemies, and it's just such a lovely and compelling tale of a young boy in this castle kind of taking it all on. I really love this story, one, because I feel like Jeff Wheeler really cherishes and celebrates the child perspective. He doesn't talk down to Owen as a child main character. In fact, he kind of shows that Owen's point of view is unique and therefore can really acknowledge and notice things that adults might miss. Also, the friendship and the mystery and all of this was just so charming. I loved it so much, and it was just a book I flew through. This is a series I'm planning on reading more books in as we follow Owen growing up throughout it. It's a very classic fantasy setting, which is also something I enjoy as well, but all in all, just a great series, and I like it a lot, and free on Kindle Unlimited. So if you have Kindle Unlimited, you can get the ebooks for free. This book I'm going to chat about is On a Pale Horse, which is the first book to a many book series. This is a very classic fantasy series that I feel like people who are really into fantasy know about, but generally I again don't hear much about on BookTube. This is a book that was recommended to me in high school by my first boss, my first job at GameStop, and I read it and I loved it then. I read many books in this series, and it's one I should honestly check out again because I really liked it a lot. It's a satirical fantasy series that has great action, but it's so funny as well. And essentially the first one, we're following Death, and essentially our main character basically kills Death and then has to take his job, and we're following him as he's like figuring that all out, and he's like driving this limousine around. It's really funny, really witty. If you kind of like that Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy kind of feel, this is a great series to pick up because it's just highly entertaining, whimsical, but has great fantasy elements as well. So this is another really great series. And the last book I'm going to chat about, I feel like almost doesn't qualify because I talk about it a lot on my channel, but I still feel like not enough people have read it, so I'm including it. And that is the Illuma Chronicles. The first one being Finnikin of the Rock. Guys, I love this series. More people need to read it. This is one of the best YA fantasy trilogies I have ever read. It's top tier. It's like if I was tier ranking series, it'd be like top tier, okay? This is amazing. This is book 1, but the entire trilogy has time skips, and each book kind of focuses on a different main character, but all the characters are kind of present and orbiting around everyone else throughout the series, which you really grow very attached to everyone. This is basically following our main character who is trying to bring his people home. Essentially, there was a land called Lumetri that was once great, destroyed by its enemies, and all the people have scattered, and now our main character Finnikin of the Rock is traveling with the Prince of the Realm to bring him back safely and hopefully kind of reestablish this place, and also kind of throughout this whole narrative exploring the struggles of reestablishing identity, the war, like everything is just so good within this series. This is a story of a journey, Finnikin trying to find this prince, bring this prince back, and kind of decide if they can actually refound the country that was lost, and kind of the heartbreak and the perils that kind of comes with that. Again, I would say this first one is really a foundational novel. It's kind of setting up the next 2 books, but it's just such a good trilogy and I want more people to read it. So please read it. It's so good. This one has like journey elements. It's emotional. It's just so good. I love it. It has like some of the most beautiful character arcs you will ever encounter. Alrighty guys, so those are the 10 books that you probably have never heard of that in my opinion are also so good. So please check out some of those. Leave it down below some books you feel like aren't chatted about a lot, as I would love to know, and add them to my TBR. And I'll see you guys soon with another video soon. Goodbye.